so it's an honor for us to have Rob Shaw. He's the CEO of Central Coast Community Energy, and he's going to speak basically about the future of renewable energy and basically what Central Coast Community Energy is doing basically for us in terms of our transition from fossil fuels to basically an all-electric type of energy structure. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to you, Mr. Shaw. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you, Chair Damhorst, to the Commission on the Environment. Really appreciate the opportunity to come and present. Want to be able to provide you information, help address any questions that you may have. As Commissioner Damhorst shared, my name is Robert Shaw. I'm the CEO of Central Coast Community Energy. We are your public community choice aggregator. So we are comprised of 30 cities and 5 counties from Santa Cruz to Santa Barbara. And all of the cities therein, except for King City and the city of Santa Barbara, who have their own CCA, and for the city of Lompoc, who has its own utility and has run that utility since the 1950s. By way of introduction, I am not only the CEO of Central Coast Community Energy, I serve as the president of CalCCA, the Industry Trade Association for all of the CCAs in the state of California. And I'm also your neighbor. I live in rural Aptos. My family is from this area. My father-in-law lives in Aptos Village. My mother-in-law lives in Corlitas. So I'm happy to be here. I love the opportunity to engage with you all and help answer any questions. So let me dive in. This is not a pause for suspense. I'm hoping that it will forward. Maybe can we just advance the slide? Thank you. So what is a community choice aggregator? This is a video that would show, and if it were to play, what it would be showing is that Central Coast Community Energy, we source clean and renewable energy projects. So our job is to find clean and renewable facilities that can supply energy on behalf of our customers. We partner with the IOUs, and we cover 2 different territories, Pacific Gas and Electric and Southern California Edison territory. And we partner with them. They deliver the energy through their lines. So while you're a 3CE customer, you would also be your legacy IOU customer. You're a shared customer with us. We operate not just the sourcing of energy, but also running dynamic electrification programs, really empowering and enabling customers to be able to be part of the energy transition. So our focus is designing programs, utilizing through our Community Advisory Council in partnership with the state and with our IOU partners to maximize value for all of our electric generation customers. Apologies that this did not work here. Can we advance the slide? Thank you. Just quickly, our mission and our vision, and I touched on this a little bit, long-term vision. Let's stop burning fossil fuels for energy. We know that this leads to health impacts. It leads to higher rates of asthma, lung disease, heart disease, has a detrimental impact on both our economy. We've seen drastic storms over the last few years throughout the United States and throughout the world. So climate change is a serious problem. We need to be not just moving towards solving climate change crises, but actively engaging around solutions for the climate change challenge. And what we do in pursuit of that is providing reliable, affordable, clean electricity to our customers and innovative electrification programs that's going to both help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and strengthen our local economies. Just by way of results, over the last few years, about 500,000 tons of carbon emissions per year are avoided because of our renewable energy generation projects, and another 5,000 metric tons of carbon emissions avoided because of our energy programs. Thank you. Benefits of being part of 3CE. Unlike the IOUs, our rates are the cost of serving customers. That's it. So like most public entities, our structure of rates is what does it take to cost? What is the cost to be able to serve customers? And that is the cost of the rates. We set a revenue requirement. We take it, what does it cost to serve the customer itself, assign that across rates. So they're fair, justifiable based rates. Community investment, our energy programs, we put about $15 million a year back into community investment programs. You have local control. You don't have a board of shareholders. You have elected officials that sit as our policy board that set our direction and our budget and our rates. You have CEOs of counties, and you have city managers that look at our business transactions, day-to-day contracts, policies, and operations. What does that look like in Santa Cruz? The next slide. In Santa Cruz County, that means we have always been cheaper than our incumbent IOUs. Every year of operation, we continue to be able to be cheaper than the IOU competitors. We have invested over $5 million into Santa Cruz County throughout the county over the years of our operation. You have direct opportunities for engagement with board members and for staff. I don't want to sell short the commission's ability to bring the CEO of Pacific Gas and Electric to one of your meetings, but this is what the benefit of a community organization is. Not only do you have access to our board members, but you have access to me and to our staff. And we're on that path to 100% clean and renewable. We do not use carbon offsets, carbon-free attributes. We don't use power content 3 RECs to appear to be green. We are in the business of incrementally adding to the renewable mix that's serving load in California and really driving meaningful difference. So we've contracted for 70% of our total retail demand. We're on that path to 100% by 2030. There are challenges, absolutely. We're seeing market challenges. We're seeing delays and regulatory challenges. Certainly, federal policy changes and emphasis around the way federal energy policy will work will be challenges to those. But our staff is dedicated to making sure that we remain on track to serve those goals. Next slide. So the California goal is to be 100% by 2045. This goal has been changed several times in the legislature. Our goal is to get to 100% by 2030. So that's full 15 years in front of what the state goal is. And part of that goal is going to require energy storage systems. Next slide. So this is our process where we stand today. In 2045, now 2 things have happened. One, we've seen projects being delayed because of interconnection challenges. Our other challenge is that we have just increased our load. So when we set our goal in 2030, or 2020, we were 17 members. We quickly grew to 19 members in 2021. We're now 35 members. So we have more than doubled our load. So when you see these numbers and it's 29%, we've moved the goalpost on ourselves, but you'll see that we're on target to be 50, just below 60% in 2027. As I mentioned, we have 70% contracted. And you'll see in a moment, we have a number of projects currently in negotiation, and we have an RFP out today. So we're still moving forward, and I think aggressively in pursuit of the 2030 goal, but we'll have to be responsive to market impacts as we move forward. So decarbonization is a storage challenge. We can build renewable generation. Absolutely can build renewable generation. We have seen a dramatic increase in solar generation and wind generation and geothermal generation, but there is a limited amount of geothermal available in California. We will maximize it as the CCA industry, but it's a limited amount that's available. So our challenge is to be able to pair that solar generation, which is available when the sun is shining or when the wind is blowing, and with battery storage so that we can move that to the more high emitting hours that are on the shoulder hours. So we all know now 6 to 9 p.m., 4 to 9 p.m., but also those morning hours as well. So for the state goal, when they say 2045, they're expecting that we need to have 52,000 megawatts installed by 2045 of battery storage to be able to meet that goal. And I'll tell you, that's every kind of storage. You absolutely need to have storage that moves quickly, that can ramp on and off as clouds come over, and you need to be able to meet demand. You need something that can come on immediately and turn off. You need longer seasonal storage that can help you move from really abundant solar and wind in the fall into those doldrum hours across the winter. And you absolutely need to be able to look at pumped hydro storage capabilities, longer duration storages to get through the evening hours. All of those have to be on the table. Slide.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
What is BTM solar?
Behind the meter solar.
Okay, so that's rooftop, basically.
It could be rooftop, ground mounted, residential, or
Okay.
commercial.
Okay, great. Thank you.
What do batteries do? This is part of this. One, they balance intermittent renewables, and that's what I was just talking about. They're adding grid service and stability, and this is that ramping throughout the day. A solar generation profile is very uneven. Wind is even more uneven. It's not a base load generation resource that's going to generate over time at a steady level. So because of that, solar batteries or batteries can help add stability to the grid to make sure that we're charging and discharging and meeting the grid's needs within every second of the day. That's our task. And that's what the California Independent System Operator is tasked with, meeting supply and demand to the exact amount within every second of every day. It's reducing reliance on existing combustion generation. And I'll talk about a few projects that we have that are focused on just that. We are displacing the need to build new combustion generation resources, but we're also using batteries to displace existing dispatch of combustion generation. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Affordability is a massive crisis in California. Electricity rates have grown between 8 and 10% in the IOU territories over the last 4 years. Every year, 8 to 10%. And I think it's 200% since 2020. It's a dramatic increase. And I want to be clear, if our goal is to electrify everything, and that has to be the goal, right? If you want to fight climate change, first decarbonize the grid, use that decarbonized energy to electrify absolutely everything that you can, and then focus on big industrial operations that are difficult to electrify. That's the goal. It's simple. But you have to be able to do it affordably, or the alternative of gas generation is just too appealing and customers won't make the transition. So we have to be able to do it affordably. And when I look at my service territory, 5 counties, and I think about families that are struggling to make rent payments, struggling to pay for medicine, put food on the table, electricity isn't that thing that they cannot pay. So I keep very close to my attention and my staff's attention that we're being able to deliver our services as affordably as possible. So thinking about how batteries can help serve that, one, you put them close to load. Batteries close to load allow those batteries to work quickly, to meet load and reduce the need for building long transmission lines. Second, you put them next to generation where there is no load. A lot of California's renewable generation is in the desert. That's where the sun is abundant, but there's not a lot of load there. You'll see in a moment that we have a lot of what's called curtailment. Excess solar in California is dramatic. We are curtailing tons of energy. Batteries next to that existing generation captures that very low cost solar and allows us to displace expensive gas generation in the evening hours and coincidentally reduce emissions. So it's good on both ends of that scale. And then empowering customers. If you have solar on your home and you've experienced the power shutoff, and you don't have a battery, you have found that it doesn't work. You are not being served during those hours. The backup battery generation is essential for customers to be able to do their own energy consumption management, their own load shifting, participate in demand response programs at the state, be part of that energy solution. Next slide. I want to take you back to September, Labor Day of 2022. You will all remember September 6, 2022 as the date that you got an Amber Alert that says, please stop using your electricity. The most significant demand response that California has ever seen. And if I remember correctly, it curtailed about 2,500 megawatts of demand, which is pretty remarkable. 2,500. Pretty remarkable demand response. And what you see here in 2022, we were sitting at roughly 5,000 megawatts of installed batteries. And the very faint purple at the bottom of this graph is showing you where batteries are charging between hours ending 8 and 12. Oh, I'm sorry, dispatching 8 to 12. And then, let me back up just so that I'm clear. They were charging between 8 and 12. And then that's in the negative part of the graph. It flips to the positive part of the graph, hours 14 through 21, and that's the batteries discharging. And we required an Amber Alert from the governor in order to prevent shut off of the grid. If you move forward to September of 2024, you'll see that it's much easier to explain where batteries are charging here because they're much more prominent. So in 2024, we have about 13,000 megawatts of batteries installed. They are charging early, they are charging in the middle of the day, and they are discharging in the evenings. And that discharge is not just preventing any kind of grid stress event, it's displacing generation from combustion facilities, and it's displacing the need for imports from outside of California. And it may look relatively modest, but this is the value of the batteries. You are taking that excess solar from the middle of the day and being able to move it to the shoulder hours. And this is the path for meeting our renewable goals. If you can go forward. I talked a little bit about curtailments. We have so much solar in California, and you can look at the colors and they kind of track. You have the 2019 yellow. You can see 2020 and 2021 track very similarly. You can see 2022 jumps up, 23 jumps up, 24 jumps up. What's happening in 2025 that's really concerning for me? It is starting earlier and faster. There is so much solar generation from rooftops, from utility scale, so much generation happening. A curtailment is effectively a negative price so that you will not put the solar on the grid. And curtailment orders effectively mean you're putting it in the ground. So if we don't have enough battery storage, you're leaving all of that solar generation. And if you're leaving solar generation, you're increasing costs for customers. During the middle of the day when solar is generating, the next dispatchable unit is solar. It's effectively free. And here, the CAISO would say, I don't want the free energy. But if you can't capture that energy at that low cost, in the evening hour, the next dispatchable resource is not solar, it's now a gas facility. And the cost of a gas facility dispatching is the cost of fuel, cost of running it, which is called a heat rate, the cost of storage of the fuel, maintenance and operation. It's dramatically different and much more expensive. And of course, comes with emissions. If we can look forward. Just a sense of curtailments. This is a graph. We had to put some data in to generate the graph. This is March 15th of 2025. You can see the solar is the bright yellow. You can see imports above it. But what we added with the sort of cap above the triangle there is what the solar generation profile looks like. So solar generation is a parabolic generation curve. It increases throughout the day and then wanes as you get into the early evening hours. So that is showing the purple triangle at the top of the graph is showing the curtailment that's occurring. But what you're seeing on the bottom is the batteries charging. So that's the exact opportunity that I'm talking about. Batteries are essential to being able to capture that. We can move forward. Let me talk a little bit about 3CE's battery portfolio. We currently have 110 megawatts operating, including the first ever solar plus storage project in California. We have 728 megawatts contracted for, so not yet delivered or operating, but they include the largest compressed air storage in the world, in the United States. There's a larger one in Australia. We also have multiple hybrid battery projects where we're siting projects right at combustion facilities and competing for their interconnection. So every facility that interconnects to the California grid is only allowed to dispatch at a certain level to ensure that all resources can compete equally in the grid. So we're effectively taking the interconnection that was assigned to a combustion unit and reassigning it to a battery. And I'll talk about that in a moment. We're actively negotiating over 500 megawatts of additional storage, which do include seasonal storage, pumped storage, long duration storage, and 4-hour storage opportunities. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we have a request for offer out seeking another probably 300 to 500 megawatts appetite of storage facilities that are going to be necessary to meet that 100% goal. I also want to mention that we've launched a residential battery program. This program is incentivizing customers, whether they have solar or not. I think the program is $300 a megawatt up to 26 megawatts of battery storage, and for income qualified customers, 500 megawatts. And if I remember correctly, we have about 80, it's probably increased since our last CAC meeting, applicants participating in that program. But we're pairing that with telemetry where the customer is committing to dispatch at least 50% of that battery in those evening hours, which helps reduce the cost for all customers. Because if I have to buy less energy in the very expensive gas-controlled emitting hours of 4 to 9 o'clock, if I can reduce that need, it's reducing costs for all customers. And then because of the way our rates are structured, all customers benefit from that. We can go to the next slide. So the three hybrid battery projects that I mentioned a little bit earlier where we're competing for interconnection. So we have contracted to put 2 separate 1-hour batteries at 2 separate peaker facilities. A peaker facility is a very cheap to build, very expensive to run gas combustion facility. It is intended to meet those ramp hours in the evening that they burn very hot. They're very, very emitting. So placing a 1-hour battery, because it would be the last possible resource to dispatch because it's very expensive, but placing a 1-hour battery there, we're actually going to be able to curtail the hours that that facility runs over the lifetime of the battery by 70%. I think it's 74%, but just round number, 70%. So that's reducing very high emissions from a very dirty facility that is almost always located in underserved communities. There are some peaker facilities near the coast, but not very many. Goleta is the one that comes to mind in our service territory. We've also contracted for an 8-hour battery at the Tracy Combined Cycle Gas Turbine facility. So that's a 300 megawatt facility. We took 40 megawatts away from that facility to build an 8-hour duration battery. So while it will only curtail that facility at 12%, that facility runs a great deal more. So it's a lot more hours that it's curtailing. There are significant grid benefits, but even more significant health benefits for those communities. These are communities that are suffering from as I mentioned earlier, asthma issues, suffering from lung and heart issues. CEJA identified this facility. CEJA is the California Environmental Justice Advocates Association. Identified this as the 9th most polluting facility in California. So this battery being located there is going to be able to help reduce the energy burden to that underserved community. Move forward. Sorry about the title. We were working on the slides very late, but what this is showing is what are the rates of incidences. So this is from EPRI's database. EPRI, I believe, is the electric. I'll remember in a moment. It's the Electric Power Research Institute. Thank you. You're exactly right. So what this is showing is in the United States, or this is the global scale, but what are we seeing globally? Number of incidents, and then the number of batteries installed. So what you're seeing is the rate of incidents occurring throughout the world is dramatically reducing. In the United States, the rate has dropped by 97%. In California, in 2021, we had 1 incident in California. We had, if I remember correctly, 2,400 megawatts installed in 2021. Today, in 2020, we'll look at 2024. In 2024, we had 13,000 megawatts installed, so dramatically increasing the megawatts installed. But we had 2 incidences, both in San Diego. So since 2021, you had 1 incident, 4 incidents, no incidences in 23, 2 in 24, 1 so far in 25. I can tell there's a question.
We have the same question.
Can you define incident?
Yeah, EPRI defines incident as the need for fire or any emergency safety response. So it doesn't mean fire, it means any emergency response. So if someone pulls the fire alarm in the lunchroom and people respond to the facility, that's an emergency response under EPRI's definition.
And generally, it's probably not someone in the lunchroom. What is an incident of fire usually, or?
Well, to give it a little bit of color, in 2021 was the initial Moss Landing incident. That was a heat event. There were melted wires. Where those melted wires were, but it wasn't a fire. It was a heat incident. Is that concerning? Yes, it's absolutely concerning. And I want to say from the outset, these things have to operate safely. But I want to put in context, what are we talking about when we talk about fire incidences? What is the real sort of impact as we see the dramatic increase of facilities and installed megawatts and a reduction in the overall incidences? That's telling us something. And I'll get to what is driving that in a moment. In 2024, we had 2 other incidences in Moss Landing at 2 different facilities. So the Tesla facility and the other Moss Landing facility. Following the Tesla facility, there were significant changes to the fire code and to the design of the battery cages. And I'll talk about what those were in a moment. But the industry moved very, very quickly, both around the design and then the technology utilized in lithium batteries. And then after that, in 23, I think I said 0 before, there was 1, it was at Valley Center. In 24, there were 2, both in San Diego, Otay Mesa's in Orange County, and then in Escondido in San Diego. And then, of course, we had the Moss Landing incident. I should say none of those facilities were owned or operated or contracted for by 3CE or any other CCA to my knowledge. Next slide. Some of the design changes that have come out of really the Moss Landing incidences. And I will also say, just, we can all keep track in our heads. There have been 4 emergency responses to facilities in Moss Landing. And I think I've just walked through, we had 1, 4, 1, 2, and 1. So of 9 incidences across 5 years in California, 4 of them have been in Moss Landing. So when we're talking about incidences and response, one of the obvious questions is, what is happening at Moss Landing? And I think that's an area that the CPUC, our Board of Supervisors here in Santa Cruz, the Board of Supervisors, Monterey County, the Energy Commission, have all initiated separate investigations. And I think getting the results of those investigations are really important for the industry so that we're all adjusting as we move forward, because the industry does adjust very quickly. So after the Tesla facility at Moss Landing in 2022. You had a couple of changes. The first being the, let me, before I walk through changes tied specifically to Tesla, I'll walk through all the changes. And it's important to note that what's happening at Moss Landing, well, it wasn't built to the standards that are on the slide today. So it was built and commissioned prior to these standards by a few months, but still significant. So following that, if you build a facility today, it has to be internally cooled, separate fire systems, separate fire suppression systems within those containers, and the ability to derate, to slow down, shut off individual modules. And the whole concept around that is to arrest, slow, prevent thermal runaway. The next component is outdoor installations have to have distance between the modules. This was the Tesla incident lesson. Those modules, if I remember correctly, were 18 inches apart from each other. So flames from one battery cage essentially were able to jump to the next. And that's similar to what happened in the Moss Landing event in January. Now, National Fire Protection Code 855 requires at a standard of 6.5 feet, it can be 10.5 feet at certain sizes of batteries. And you're seeing most facilities build even beyond this. The Tracy facility that I talked about a little bit earlier is 28 feet apart, separated by concrete or gravel, so that you cannot have a fire in one module reaching to another, or that you have a much mitigated risk of that occurring. The last point is an industry shift away from magnesium cobalt batteries. And this also was following the Tesla facility. So very quickly, the industry has moved to lithium phosphate batteries. It is a more stable, less efficient, but you can run energy through it without the danger of it heating. So that allows you to prevent the risk of thermal runaway. These are important changes overall to both the building or fire code requirements, but also to the technology requirements. We at CalCCA were able to look at what is the portfolio that people are planning for over time. One, there are no future batteries being built indoors. And I believe that there are a couple of different bills being introduced that would prevent indoor installations. To my knowledge, there are only 2 others in California. They're both in San Diego that are existing facilities, but none planned, and none contracted with any CCA. Also, CCAs, 75% of anything under contract is this lithium phosphate or iron phosphate. And then 10 times the amount under contracts is the newer technology. So we've seen an dramatic industry shift to this more stable facility. I am not, and I don't think anyone in the industry would say that this new technology or advanced technology prevents any kind of fire incident, but it does reduce significantly the threat of thermal runaway. And then when you add independent fire suppression systems, derating capabilities, separate modules to separate and distance modulates modules away from one another, you see exactly what we've seen over time, which is you don't see incidences of these newer facilities built under these codes having fire response incidences, despite the fact that we've installed so many more thousands of megawatts in that time. Next slide. I want to share that the commission on March 13th approved General Order 167C. This brings battery energy storage facilities into the same regulatory structure as any other generating facility. So with some actual additional requirements. So they will need to have maintenance plans and operation plans that they have approved by local fire and also approved by the commission. They must comply with SB 1383 and John Laird's SB 38, which requires coordination with local fire response. They have to maintain comprehensive and respond to comprehensive audits, maintain logs, maintain incident reports, and be able to provide that all to the commission. So we're setting operation, maintenance, auditing, and reporting standards through this structure. Next slide. And then I'll end here. The only other piece that I'll add is, as I mentioned, there's a couple of different bills. They all take a different approach to this. But I think the most important component of that discussion is what did happen. We've got to complete our investigations. We've got to know what the impacts were so that we can determine what the right policy steps are as we move forward. But the industry has taken pretty dramatic changes in the face of earlier incidences. And I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
All right. I'd like to open it up to the commission. Any commissioners that have any particular questions for Mr. Shaw? Yeah, Marina?
I just had a general question of, you talked a little bit about some of the projects, or you mentioned that there were some projects that were created or invested in Santa Cruz County. Can you name what some of those are?
I don't believe I mentioned any projects in Santa Cruz County. Are you talking about the program dollars?
Or maybe it's just the investment that you've made in Santa Cruz County.
The $5 million are investments of program dollars. So there's Electrify Your Ride, a large number of participants in that program. That's our most successful, popular program. Electrify Your Home. And in Santa Cruz County, I think something like 60% of all of the dollars of that particular program come to Santa Cruz County. Just a little thank you to Bellows Electric, who has been a big advocate of that program. And then on top of that, ag electrification has been a very significant program in Santa Cruz County. But there are, to be clear, there are no utility scale batteries in Santa Cruz County. There's no utility scale generation in Santa Cruz County. So when we think about who is carrying the energy burden, it is largely lower income, Central Valley, Owens Valley residents. And Santa Cruz County has not had a single project approved. Since 2004, I think there are 63 megawatts of rooftop solar and 16 megawatts of storage on the residential commercial side in Santa Cruz County, which is dramatically slow. If we were trying to meet our goals in Santa Cruz County, relying only on individual homeowners that can afford to do that, while burdening customers that can't afford to do that with the cost of that, that would take a significant amount of time. But our energy battery storage program is looking at an all of the above solution. We've got to empower customers that have those 63 megawatts of rooftop solar to be able to store, use, reduce the burden on customers that don't have solar. So battery storage, whether you're talking about utility scale or residential scale, is essential to be able to make our renewable goals.
Yeah, I have a question on the follow-up. I believe that whenever solar power goes in, they ought to have a battery go with it. Micro grids, wherever you have it reduces the parabolic curve, and as you mentioned, it reduces the need for other kinds of energy in non-sunny times. You also mentioned the idea, which I hadn't heard before, that people that don't have solar power could still have batteries.
Yes.
And that you would encourage them to use the cheaper solar power coming to the company. You're talking about this cap and that's growing supply of not just solar, but any kind of green energy. And that you could put that into batteries of homes that don't have any kind of solar or other green source. And you could have it at a cheaper rate. Now, I hadn't heard that before. Is there something going out to the public to advise them that if they want to have, cheaper costs at night, that the power company will help them install safe storage facilities in their homes so that they can do that?
Well, to be clear, Central Coast Community Energy, we don't install the batteries. What we do is we work with our solar installers locally to make sure that they're aware of the program and they can help. We certainly do our outreach, but they are much more effective in outreach to customers. But yes, the same program, the $300 a kilowatt program is available for customers, whether they have solar or not, whether they are a net energy metering customer or not. What is really providing that opportunity is time of use rates. So you can charge at lower times in the middle of the day and avoid run your facility, your home in the evening hours and avoid higher costs from a time of use standpoint. Also, we have a new program that's available for agricultural customers now, but we will be launching for residential customers a pilot for real-time pricing where we forecast real-time pricing at no risk to customers, and they could take advantage of real-time pricing in the market.
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Jenny?
Thank you, only for the sake of the recording. You spoke a lot about the need for battery backup, and all the benefits, making our goals, et cetera. One of the things you didn't speak to that much is how important battery storage is to the resilience aspect for our community, because this is a community that's disproportionately affected by climate events. We've had, I'm probably going to get the number wrong, but I want to say 9 federally declared disasters in so many years. Yeah, it's not fun. So could you please just speak to how battery storage helps resilience? Just for, I understand it, but I think it's really good for the public to understand.
Well, I think what you're getting, individual resiliency or emergency facilities, if you're talking about cooling centers at community centers, having the ability to have on-site backup generation, so having those batteries that are available, yes, you could utilize them to maximize low cost and load shift, but being able to run during those periods that you do have shutoffs, you do have outages, whether it's coming from a power safety shutoff or a tripwire safety protocol, or simply a car running into the telephone pole down the street, being able to run essential facilities with backup generation is critical. And batteries serve that need for our residences without the need of having a diesel generator.
In our region, thanks to your policy board, and on which we are represented, our county is represented by both Carlos Palacios, our CEO, and the operations board, and Monica Martinez on your policy board. They have set a goal, the policy board has, to meet 100% renewable by 2030, which is 15 years before the state standard, which is great. We're a leader in that regard, and that's very exciting. But can we meet that standard if we do not have battery backup?
Well, the goal specifically from the board is to meet 100% of retail sales. And then importantly, this is important, trying to balance monthly. So balancing on an annual basis doesn't recognize the challenge of January, February, and probably November, where there isn't a ton of solar generation. When you try to balance at a monthly level, where you're actually recognizing that you have to rely disproportionately on gas in those periods of the year, then you absolutely have to do it with battery generation. But even if we didn't have that stretch goal, which is our intention, you would have to have battery storage. As I said, the state is anticipating you have to have 52,000 megawatts, and we're only a quarter of the way there. We won't make our 100% SB 100 goals by 2045 if we don't have battery storage, let alone 2030.
I don't think there's anyone in this room, and no one certainly that I've spoken with in this region or in this building, that supports anything other than completely safe battery storage. That is important. I see nods in the audience. It's something we all have in common. It's very, very important. I know there's 2 pieces of legislation that have been introduced. This is very early in the legislative year, and I'm very tempted to ask you to describe both of them. However, they could change dramatically. Our legislation gets proposed around this time, and it can change to be something completely different by August. So maybe we can hear about that legislation later from you or others that are experts when we get closer to the conclusion of the legislative year, because we want to know, this body would be recommending to our board what to support, and we'd want to support the right legislation that's not going to morph into something that we don't recognize, and that's always the danger. But could you describe very simply, without a huge amount of detail, what are the 2 pieces of legislation that have been proposed what do they aim to accomplish?
I actually think there's more than 2 that have been proposed, but the 2 that are probably most known in our territory is AB 303, which came out very, very quickly prior to any investigations being completed, and then borrowed from oil and gas legislation, sort of setback requirements, which would effectively, I think, narrow the ability to build the necessary battery storage in the state, let alone within our 5-county service territory, and to be able to do it affordably. And the last week, Senator Laird put together his language in his bill that really looks to increase coordination and planning between fire departments and developers. Also compliance with his bill SB 38 that requires sort of emergency response planning and protocols. Those are the 2 different bills that are out there. As you mentioned, things are moving very quickly, and I haven't had a chance to look at both bills in concert. But I do know that Senator Laird has been working very closely with the IBEW Electrification Union and the Firemen's Union to make sure that we're working something that actually addresses the problem from a safety perspective, from a fire response safety perspective, but also from the standpoint of enabling us to be able to work closely with our trades to address, making sure that we can build these things safely and effectively. And I share your concern. They absolutely have to be safe as we move forward.
Well, we'll look forward to the legislative sausage making folks coming to let us know how it lands in a few months. Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Tracy?
I had one question that I hoped you might be able to help me understand. As I understand, there's generation side of things and there's the permitting side of things. And you had made mention in your presentation that even most recently, permits change and requirements change pretty quickly. And one permit was issued and requirements shifted weeks later. Is there a requirement to have permits reviewed regularly? How, as we learn more, we can do better. How often are those permits reviewed or looked at?
Yeah, so I was speaking specifically of codes, fire codes change. Their construction permits, once they're approved, those become, those are set. They can only be reviewed again if someone comes back to the permitting authority for a change. But what GO 167 requires is an operation and maintenance plan and ongoing audit investigations. Inspections and investigations. So what the commission has set up with GO 167 is an ongoing regulatory oversight structure that would apply to all battery energy storage systems in California.
John?
Thank you, Chris. I just wanted to ask about battery composition. And you mentioned magnesium cobalt batteries going to lithium iron phosphate batteries and then possibly to sodium ion batteries. And could you, this is, obviously hugely complicated, but could you give kind of a big picture summary of where the industry is going and also mention what burned in Moss Landing?
The facility in Moss Landing, I believe all 4 incidences were around magnesium cobalt technologies. So that is a denser, less stable, highly efficient. So when you put energy in a battery, you're not going to get all of that energy back out, but it's a highly efficient response, which is probably why it was used early on. The industry has moved to lithium phosphate, which is a more stable, less dense, less efficient, but long-term it works and it's safer. So that's what the industry is using.
So just to be clear, it was not lithium iron phosphate batteries that burned at Moss Landing?
No, it was not.
Okay.
What's interesting?
And then, sorry to interrupt you, but then just as the industry progresses, are we going to be seeing sodium ion or different?
We will see what the industry identifies as cost effective. So there are a lot of ideas out there. A lot of different components can be batteries. And we have personally looked at sodium. We have personally at 3CE, we have looked at gravity storage. We've looked at pumped storage. We've looked at long duration batteries, whether it's vanadium chemicals or sodium, which is in composition with hydrogen. It has to be cost effective for customers. in order for us to move that forward. And the industry as a whole will move once it is cost effective. But just like our compressed air project, our board has set a standard that will say you absolutely have to meet all of your load serving entity requirements. But the board has said if you can be within market, and within market's about 5% of the market, and push an innovative project and help it get to market where it can reduce some of its costs, improve a proof of concept, then we will do that. And that's what our compressed air project is all about.
I have one more. We don't have a lot of, we don't have a lot of reservoirs and hydropower in Santa Cruz County. I know I worked at state parks, and the Pelton wheel at Wilder Ranch generated electricity for their barns, long before there was electricity anywhere else in the county. But we don't generally have the hydropower where you have a reservoir and your turbines running from the reservoir water to generate your electricity, as opposed to solar. But it is a renewable resource that people like hydropower. And when you mention this pump storage or gravity storage, I don't know if everybody in the audience is familiar with that, but my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that basically you would put water into a container, a dam or a tower or whatever during the solar power days, when you just can pump it up and fill up the whole thing. And then when the sun goes down, you let the water go back out of that container and generate electricity. Is that correct?
That is pumped storage, absolutely. Gravity storage is almost like an elevator. You would take very, very heavy bricks or rocks. You would raise them with electricity in the middle of the day when it's cheap, and then you would slowly decrease it and generate electricity in the evening.
Right. So on those alternative things other than batteries, because what we're talking about here a lot is batteries, but on those alternative ways of storing electricity so you can use it again later, do we have any projects that are proposed in your area, your 5 counties and cities, for alternative kinds of systems other than batteries?
No, our compressed air project was originally proposed in unincorporated San Luis Obispo County, but it was moved because of CAISO, California Independent System Operator requirements, which is an important thing when you're siting these batteries. They get cited not just where we need them from a load serving perspective, but where the California Independent System Operator can guarantee deliverability and interconnection. It's a complicated regulatory process. Happy to explain someday.
Thank you.
Maria?
I was wondering about in our county, where is the most demand, in terms of energy, and also for the, I guess, locations. I think you mentioned like Tracy, all of those areas, like what has been the process for deciding locations? And I mean, I know this is like for the ones that you like 3CE has proposed, like where would be the place to, like see where, I don't know, like if there's a proposed project, kind of just anything about your process for when you do that.
Yeah. So our policy board adopted a project selection criteria, which lays out the criteria and value set, which our board wants us to consider when citing projects. We apply that to any project that gets offered to 3CE, and then walk through how it is scored pursuant to that methodology as part of the project approvals. But we do not site and we do not permit any facilities. That is the jurisdiction. And I want to be really clear, as part of our project selection criteria, our board has said that is for that jurisdiction. The jurisdiction having authority knows their environment, they know their community, they know what the impacts of those facilities are and what they believe is an appropriate mitigation. That is not part of what 3CE does. I don't know if that's addressing your question about where the projects are cited. Largely, our battery projects are cited. I think we have our compressed air project is outside of Bakersfield. Our Midway project is in Fresno. The Pinoche project is in Firebaugh. Tracy is obviously in Tracy. And then those projects are cited because that's where the interconnection is with gas facilities that we can offset. Other projects are located primarily close to our generation facilities. Again, having generation in the desert, you better have a battery in place. And then we do have a couple of local projects. The one that I'm thinking of is in Santa Maria. The Santa Maria project is going through a permitting process, and it's a very small battery. It's about 10 megawatts.
Now, just one statement that I wanted to make too, Mr. Shaw, was that you guys and your organization is under pretty heavy regulatory requirements by the California Public Utilities Commission in terms of resource adequacy. And to my understanding of that is that basically you have to be able to deliver an energy load at any given moment for the demand that's required by the community and all the members that you have in Central Coast Community Energy. So that means you kind of need to either be a commodities trader, right, and figure out what the price long-term is going to be of these peaker plants in order to have that backed up, or you have battery storage that you can rely on to meet your resource adequacy requirements that the CPUC puts on you. So just so this audience and the commission understands that, in my perspective, is you walk a very fine line, a tightrope between keeping your costs down and keeping pollution down. Because you could go out and, I guess, enter a contract with a peaker plant all day long and say goodbye to batteries completely 100%. But that's not going to get us to our, getting off of fossil fuels. And then you have to balance costs too, obviously, as well, which you mentioned in your presentation earlier on too, is that the cost of utilities are skyrocketing. So it's hard for me to understand where we have a future where we keep costs down and pollution down without some type of battery system, right? I mean, it's going to be a percentage of your portfolio no matter what going forward, right?
You absolutely need battery storage to be able to meet the 100% goal. Intermittent renewables will not do it on their own.
Okay. So thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Okay. I want to thank you for coming out tonight. I know your busy schedule, and we're really honored to have you here. We really appreciate it. We are going to open up for public questions. Yeah. So I did want to definitely thank Mr. Shaw for that. So we're going to open up to the public. So in the essence of time, we're going to try to keep everybody down to a minute so that we can get everybody that can speak, the last and also online too as well. So if we could have a timer for a minute and try to respect that as much as we can, we sure appreciate it. And if you would just introduce yourself too as well.
Okay, I'm Keith McHenry. I'm third generation National Park Service naturalist. My grandfather retired from Yosemite as the chief naturalist to here and set up the tidal pool walks at Natural Bridges. We installed our first solar hot water system in the early 70s. I want to point out that half of all fossil fuels burned in the United States are burned by the US military. So there's where you get your climate change savings, is by cutting the military. I was, and my family were poisoned by the Moss Landing fire. And I've been suffering ever since. And as my girlfriend, her face is burning off. She has holes in her side of her head from the chemicals. My tongue has been on fire since the 17th of January. It's really unbearable. We can't live in our house because it's like somebody's tear gassing our house. So I am against the lithium battery facilities being installed in Santa Cruz County. And I hope that this agency will make sure that we do not get the 3 battery storage facilities that are being proposed for Santa Cruz, because we cannot afford to have a fire. They said that all these
start to wrap it up. That would be great.
Yeah, that all the batteries were real safe, the ones that have caught fire. So I don't really trust the battery industry. And the county had a very horrible response to this large health emergency, which was it just tried to shove it under the rug, and that's outrageous. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. And next. Yeah, that's fine. If you guys want to, if you feel more comfortable with that, absolutely.
Hi, my name is Diane, and I live South County, about a mile or 2 away from the proposed Minto Lake, Minto Road one. I know that I'm a 3CE stakeholder, and I honestly don't consent to this lithium ion battery batteries at all. I think that they're highly toxic. You know, to see them put right out in our fields that are world-class agricultural fields. I mean, there was a 2-mile radius from Moss Landing that was toxic. And if we do that to our fields that grow the nation's food, if we put them near Dominican Hospital or the high school, we cannot evacuate people, animals, or anything like, you know, the way that Moss Landing, you know, being sort of more isolated that way. Everything goes to the ocean, our marine sanctuary, our lakes nearby. We are just, I think it's a toxic time bomb, and I'm really concerned about that. A new battery technology is coming. It's an evolving field. I think we really need to take a pause. We're at a crossroads, and I don't think we should just accept lithium ion. We need to do this for the long haul. And I would ask you to look and really put a pause on this. We really need something that is safe as the bottom line. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becca Steinbrunner. I really hope that you as an advisory commission will ask that the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors approve an urgency ordinance to put a temporary moratorium on lithium battery technology for battery energy storage systems. The board will be considering most likely a proposed ordinance for this overlay system, these 3 sites in the county on April 22nd. They took action on October 29th, saying that by April 25th of this year, they would pass the final ordinance for this. You need to please talk with your supervisors and advise them, and please ask them to send a letter of support for Don Addis's AB 303 that really does establish bringing back local control that Mr. Shaw said is integral, and we all know it is. It will bring it back to our local control. We know what is best. It will also install 3,200-foot setbacks from hospitals, schools, and sensitive environmental places. So please do that. Please do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
Hi, I wanted to thank you all for opening this meeting so that we can actually hear what's going on and the process. I had several family members, in-laws, who were part of Southern California Edison when they were going through the transition of, you know, having the kinds of fuels, creating the electricity. And my father-in-law actually at one point tried to electrify Southern California. It was a big failure and a disaster in terms of Southern California Edison. And then later on, he founded, because Southern California Edison was not into alternative energy, founded Mission Energy, which had a lot of solar and alternative things, because he didn't want to keep doing nuclear power plants. So I understand how difficult this job is to create the energy supply needs of our ever expanding communities, and especially someone locally here in Santa Cruz to try, if we don't have anything producing these energies other than the homeowners and stuff, we need to figure out safe alternatives. And ion lithium has been proven over and over an insane way to do it. So thank you for that consideration. Please influence our Board of Supervisors to do something safer.
Thank you.
I wanted to listen to a very long presentation. It was really well done. It was thorough. I spent quite a bit of time putting together what I wanted to share with you. The public has had very little chance to talk about this with people in authority. I'm stunned that you limited the time for people to speak to 1 minute. The Brown Act allows people 3. I discovered when I first started participating that now it's only 2. And now I come here after writing this very carefully, and I see it's cut down to 1. If I had known that, I would have spoken like Becky in the beginning and again now. So please let me speak what I have to say. It's not very long.
And one thing I can say is that you're more than welcome to email all of your information that you have and anything that you wanted to say to this commission. I'm happy to give you my email address directly to send that to me.
I hope that you also listen to what I just said.
Absolutely.
My name is Nina Audino. My parents were both refugee children of World War II who grew up alongside the killing fields of more than one European state and knee-deep in the toxic mess left behind in the wreckage of war. My mother used to say so often that it became grafted into the living part of me that is my moral core. It takes only seconds, maybe only minutes, maybe only hours to destroy what it took many generations of work and love to raise up, like Elkhorn Slough. We are immensely privileged to live amongst a vibrantly diverse and creative community in an astoundingly beautiful county that has 14 state parks, 29 miles of iconic beaches, over 47,000 acres of precious farmland, of which 25% is certified organic, the highest county percentage in the state, and 14,000 acres in Land Trust Conservancy. It took many hands and many generations to raise all of this up. And into the land area of the second smallest county in California, our board proposes to ram 3 industrial utility-sized lithium-ion BESS facilities on a 15-mile stretch. I have more to say.
Can we do 2 more minutes? We'll give you the full 3 for sure.
This morning, I listened to a webinar put together by GoBiz on how best to deploy these BESS facilities in a climate of growing skepticism and opposition, on how to put a playbook together that would re-educate the public, sunk as we all are in uneducated fears of new technology. A major chunk of the 3-hour webinar focused, unsurprisingly, on fire risk and a long list of ways to minimize and mitigate the risk, and how to creatively and dishonestly discount its very real toxic fallout. But what stood out to me most was the unadorned statement made by the CPUC. She simply said, "No one knows how to suppress this once it's in flame." Ask any battery engineer who is not on an energy developer's payroll to guarantee that there'll never be a containerized lithium fire that will burn through a container and spread to others. Ask them to guarantee that new generation LFP batteries are 100% fire and explosion risk-free. Ask them to guarantee how the winds will blow on the day the fire spreads. As a community that values the lives and future of our children as something far greater than profit margins, we need to put the onus on contracted energy developers to definitively prove that their battery energy storage facilities will cause no harm, not safer, no harm, before their plans are accepted. Clean energy should never come at the expense of public safety. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Is anyone else in the sitting audience? Do we have anybody online?
Yes, we do. We have 3 people with their hands raised online. So,
Okay.
Sarah, I'm allowing you to talk and you can unmute yourself. I think you need to unmute yourself, Sarah. There you go.
Hi, I did not sign up to speak, so I don't know how I got on the list, but the other people have said what I would have said, so.
Okay, your hand was raised, so.
Oh, okay.
I'll go on to the next person now. Barry?
Yes, thank you. My name is Barry Scott, and I'm the State Director of the National Energy Education Development Project. I manage energy education programs for K-12 schools, as well as energy career pathway programs at various high schools in Northern and Central California. In June 2020, I was honored to be named Monterey Bay Community Power's Clean Energy Hero. In my 18 years as State Director, I visited plenty of power plants, training centers in the independent system operator, and have extensive experience understanding how to deliver affordable, clean, and safe energy to customers. I live just a few miles from the Moss Landing plant, and I attended the September 2023 town hall after 2 earlier incidents, and last year I toured the Moss Landing battery facility itself. Storage has long been understood to be the key to deploying more wind and solar generation, and also serves as a hedge against outages. Storage allows communities to operate independently of the grid when needed and helps the state grid operate independent from out-of-state generation that can be carbon intensive and more expensive. With the substantial growth in demand anticipated from data centers, and with increased impacts predicted from climate-related events, deploying safe storage projects, including battery storage, is more critical now than ever. Senator Laird's Clean Energy Act of 2025, SB 283, provides the safety oversight needed to allow our state to proceed with these important battery storage installations. And I thank you for allowing me to comment.
Thank you.
We have one more. A phone-in caller with the last three numbers 192. I'm going to allow you to talk now, and you can press *6 to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Gail, and I think the industry presentation or the report called a fire that lasts several weeks with reignitions as one incident, which I think is disingenuous. The industry report also emphasized that the chosen technology has to be cost effective. That says to me that safety, or what is best for the people, is last or second at best. I think the people should be dictating this. I think there needs to be more input. A moratorium makes more sense than choosing from the limited information we have. The history of a French company, public bus company, completely abandoned their electric buses because fires were burning the whole fleet. A tanker was completely sank by these cars that caught fire. It's very well known that this is not really working. So I think Nikola Tesla is turning in his grave because he already figured out sources of free energy. So I think we should not let the almighty dollar dictate what we choose to use here or be rushed to make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. So
I don't see any other hands raised now, but actually I'll just announce again, if you're online and you do want to speak, you can press the raise hand icon now. I'm not seeing anybody else.
Okay.
Oh, yes, one hand just went up. Okay.
All right.
Woody, you can unmute yourself now. Woody, I think you need to unmute yourself on your end. One more time, Woody, I've unmuted you. You need to unmute yourself on your computer. Okay, well.
All right, Debbie, let's go ahead and move on.
There's to
Okay.
be some technical
All right.
difficulties.
They're always free to email into any other questions that might have.
And then another hand went up.
Okay.
Let's see, I'll remove that. And Satya, you can unmute yourself.
Oh, yeah, hello. I wasn't going to say anything, but one thing I'd just like to add, the people who live in Moss Landing should be considered the evidence. I know there's a lot of various testing and various opinions about the air and soil testing that's been done, but I think it's very important to actually look at the people in Moss Landing and listen to them. They're not activists. They're not people who generally are used to coming forward. A lot of them are Hispanic people who are concerned about getting in some sort of trouble if they make too big a a public statement about where they're at. So I would just say, look at the evidence that these people are the evidence of the danger that can happen when these batteries catch fire. And as has been said before by all of these very truth-telling people who've shared, this is something that everyone needs to pay attention to. It's obvious, it's out in the open to be seen. So please don't let them have suffered in vain from this. Let this be a chance to make a difference. That's all I want to say. Thank you. It's a wake-up call. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if that's it, David, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up this item. Jenny?
Yes, I have no other speakers online.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, in the interest, did I put that on? Yes. In the interest of time, and thank you so much for the next presenter being patient. Thank you very much, Stephanie and Tatiana. One thing we did not agendize tonight, folks, is advising our board on any particular land use project. That's not on our agenda tonight. We cannot advise our board tonight. If it's not on the agenda, we can't take action on it. We also did not agendize advising our board on any particular legislation, which actually wouldn't be advisable anyway, because that legislation is going to go through changes and we want to see where it goes, all of the different legislation. But what we did agendize tonight is an information item, and there's a lot of important information that's come out tonight. Thanks to Mr. Shaw. Thank you so much for you and your team coming, and for the members of the public coming and giving us your perspective. And because that good information is here, we can write a letter to our board, letting them know that we received this information and that we discussed this information and you all came out because you're interested. And I think that's very appropriate. One thing that I've heard pretty much from everyone that we can agree on is safety and being very cautious. And I think that's very, very important. So again, we can't advise our board on one particular land use project or another, or a zoning overlay ordinance that is not gone before them yet, or legislation, but we can tell them that we, through a letter, if that's, and I'm going to make this a motion for the commission, that you allow our chair to write a letter to our board, articulating that we received this information tonight, expressing the interest of the public on the topic, and letting them know about the information we received. And so that they have good information, because I do continue to be concerned that there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I would like to see us say to that, to let us board know that we made time for this topic. It's an important topic. It might come back, we don't know. But that we heard information, we want to make sure that they know what we heard. So I would make that as a motion.
Can we get a second?
I second that motion.
All right, quick vote on it too. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. So David, if we could get that in the minutes.
Thank you, everyone. for coming.
Yes, yes.
Good job. Thank you.
Yep. So yeah, I do, as we wrap this topic up, I do want to thank everybody and reiterate what Jenny had mentioned too, and to thank Rob Shaw and his staff for coming out and making all this possible. It's definitely been a huge benefit for us. So thank you to everyone tonight. And without further ado, then we're going to move on.